In a forgotten corner of the world, buried beneath layers of time, lies a truth too horrifying to tell, but tonight you'll hear it. Deep in the remote forests of Romania, a group of archaeology students set out on an expedition that would alter the course of their lives forever. Among them was Alina, a young historian driven by an obsession with the Trinivans, an enigmatic and long-forgotten civilization that vanished nearly 5,000 years ago. The Trinivans had been known for their intricate rituals and their belief in a dark and powerful force, a spirit known only as the Unseen One. For years, Alina had studied the Trinivans' legends, trying to decipher their meaning, their culture, and most importantly, the mystery behind the spirit they worshipped. Little did she know, her spirit of knowledge would lead her to an unimaginable encounter. The group of students, led by Professor Marian, set off on a crisp morning, traveling into the heart of Romania's dense forests. The path ahead was rugged, barely traversable, and the further they ventured, the more they felt isolation. Alina was more than eager, her mind racing with possibilities. She had been researching the Trinivans for years. Old manuscripts, fragmented carvings, and even whispers from local villagers had spoken hushed tones of the spirits that haunted the land. They were heading to a location only recently discovered by satellite imaging. A forgotten burial site hidden deep within a mountain valley. Local villagers refused to even acknowledge its existence. When questioned, they only muttered the same two words: Caminal Umbrelor, the home of shadows. As the team approached the site, an uncanny stillness seemed to take over the forest. The usual sounds of rustling leaves and distant bird calls had faded into an eerie silence. No one stirred the branches. No animal dared to make a sound. Even the scent of the forest, damp and earthy, was absent. It was as if nature itself had held its breath. Alina felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise. It was a feeling she couldn't take off. There was something about this place, something ancient, oppressive, and hungry. After a long trek, they arrived at the site. The air was thick with an otherworldly heaviness. Before them, half buried in the earth, was a stone entrance, its surface engraved with strange symbols worn by time. It appeared to lead into a tomb, dark, foreboding, and lost to history. "Looks like we've found it," Professor Marian said, his voice tinged with awe. Alina knelt down and examined the symbols, noting the familiar spiraling patterns that matched those in the Trinivan texts she had studied. But it was the inscription beneath them that sent a chill down her spine. It was written in a language older than any she had encountered. "Beware those who disturb the bound." The words echoed in her mind, warning her, cautioning her. But Alina, driven by her obsession with uncovering the truth, pressed on. And right before they entered the tomb, Alina whispered, "We're on the edge of history," her fingers tracing the characters. "We can't turn back now." Then with great effort, the group cleared away the dirt, revealing the full extent of the entrance, a massive stone archway leading down into the darkness below. The air grew colder as they descended, and the silence was oppressive. Their flashlights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls, which were covered in intricate markings, symbols that spiraled and twisted in ways that defied logic. Alina was absorbed in her research, so determined to unravel the mystery that she barely noticed the change in the atmosphere around her, but the others did. "I don't like this," one of the students, Marcus, muttered. "It feels wrong, guys." Alina pushed forward, ignoring the unease in her group. She had come too far to stop now. And at the center of the tomb, they found what they had been searching for. A massive black altar, carved from the very rock itself, stood in the middle of the chamber. Its surface was unnaturally slack, as if something had recently been poured over it. There were stains, a dark, unsettling color that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. And then, amidst the altar's eerie presence, Alina saw it, a perfectly preserved urn, sitting alone atop the stone structure. The urn was sealed shut with what appeared to be human hair and wax. the surface inscribed with spiraling symbols that shifted and moved beneath their gaze, as if the very nature of the markings were alive. Despite the growing sense of dread, Alina couldn't resist the pull. She stepped forward, trembling with anticipation, and carefully broke the seal. As the lid of the urn came off, the temperature in the room plummeted, sending an icy chill through their bones. The lights of their flashlights flickered violently, casting long shadows across the walls. Then, a deep hum began to fill the chamber, growing louder and more intense until it became a terrible screech that rattled their very souls. "What's happening?" Marcus gasped, his voice high-pitched with fear. Suddenly, the lights went out entirely. The chamber plunged into darkness. A moment later, the flashlights flickered back on. But what they illuminated was far worse than anything they could have imagined. In the far corner of the chamber stood a shape, tall, monstrous, and completely formless. It was a shadow, but it wasn't like any shadow they had ever seen. It moved unnaturally, stretching, elongating, its form ever changing, as though it existed beyond the constraints of time and space. Then another student whispered, saying, "What is that?" The shadow remained motionless for a long moment, but then it began to stretch, growing taller, its dark form reaching towards them. It did not move in a way that was natural. It slid, it melted, it seemed to dissolve into the very walls themselves before vanishing entirely. Then someone screamed, "That's enough! We need to leave now!" Panic set in. The students turned to flee, but their path was blocked. The entrance to the tomb had vanished. The stone doorway that they had entered through was gone, replaced by solid earth, as if the tomb had sealed itself shut. Alina's heart pounded in her chest. The group scrambled around, searching for a way out, but it was no use. The tomb had become their prison now. Suddenly, Alina felt a searing pain in her chest. She gasped, clutching at her heart as dark veins spread rapidly across her skin, creeping outward like an invasive force. Her eyes widened in horror as she realized that something was taking root inside her. The low hum returned, louder this time. And then, a voice. It came from everywhere and nowhere, deep and layered with an unnatural cadence. "You have called me back," the voice said, its tone booming in their minds. The shadow reappeared. This time, it had shape, but it was not a human shape. It was a mass of writhing darkness, swirling and twisting, as if it had been formed from the very nightmares of the Trinivant people. The group froze in terror as the shadow moved towards them, each of them immobilized by fear. The last thing Alina could do was drop the urn. She let it fall from her hands, and it shattered on the stone floor. But the spirit didn't stop. "You broke the seal," it hissed. "Now you belong to me." One by one, the students were consumed by the darkness. Screams filled the air as they were enveloped, their bodies swallowed by the shadow. Each scream echoed through the tomb, but they were quickly silenced by the hum that grew ever louder. Alina was the last to stand, her breath shallow and ragged. She fell to her knees, pleading for her life, but the voice echoed in her mind again. "You wanted to know the Trinivants. Now you will join them." Then comes the final descent. The ground beneath Alina's feet cracked open, revealing a bottomless pit. She was pulled towards it, the dark force dragging her towards the skeletal remains that lay beneath. Her heart raced as she saw the altar glowing faintly, its surface now illuminated by the terror in her eyes. The shadow was closing in, its tendrils reaching for her. Then Alina gasped, her voice barely a whisper, saying, "No, no, 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 this cannot be happening." The last thing she saw was the altar, pulsing with a sickly light as she was pulled into the pit. Her screams were swallowed by the darkness. Then comes the aftermath. The next morning, the villagers discovered a clearing, but there was no trace of the group. The entrance to the tomb had disappeared, replaced by solid earth, as though it had never been opened. All that remained was Alina's notebook. It laid open on the ground, its pages turned to the last entry she had written. It's not a legend, it's waiting. Have you ever wondered what ancient civilizations left behind? Some treasures should remain buried. And that's it for today's story, guys. If you enjoyed this terrifying tale, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of the unknown. Let us know in the comments, what's the scariest ancient legend you've ever heard? Stay curious, but stay safe.